quorum present. We have two members joining us online today. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Love.
Here.
Perry.
Here.
Peter.
Here.
Spiker.
Here.
Valderrama.
Okay. I think Commissioner Valderrama may need to re-log in. So when we see her pop up, we'll record her as present. First item of business is the meeting minutes from September 21st. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes. I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and second to approve the minutes of September 21st. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Mickey. I will delay next time so that you have a chance to vote. My apologies. And it looks like Commissioner Valderrama is present, so thank you for being there. Great. Next item of business is the review of maps developed by commissioners. So Eric, why don't you take it away?
Evening, everybody. All right. On screen, can you see the spreadsheet we put together? All right. So per the request, we took all the submissions from all the commissioners and I put them together just to match them up based on their areas and then the percentage off of the target balance for each area. Do bear in mind, everybody's area 4 isn't exactly in the same place, so don't pay too much attention to how they match up this way. It's more important how they match up this way. And then per the request to show how many split precincts there were, then how many split neighborhoods there were based on each proposal. Although it didn't hold true in every case, usually it was the case that the closer you got dialed in to have every district to have the population matched as closely as possible, you sacrificed the secondary objective of not splitting precincts. That doesn't hold true necessarily across the board, but in general, that's what we saw, and truthfully, that was to be expected. I'm going to switch over to the maps that were put together. Just a couple of things before I start digging into the details. There are a couple of areas where just based on the way that the county precincts were drawn, and I triple checked that I got the right ones this time, and the way that the census blocks.
Yeah, Eric, can you pause for just 1 second?
Absolutely.
We have commissioners online and we're having trouble hearing. So
I get my face a little closer, is that better?
Carolina or Commissioner Valderrama and Commissioner Love, can you both hear Eric better?
I can hear just fine.
Okay, Commissioner Valderrama, can you hear Eric speaking? Eric, why don't you test it one more time?
How are we doing now?
Okay, maybe she's rejoining to test her sound. So we're recording the meeting. So why don't you go ahead and proceed? Thank you.
So just bear in mind this pink line going through right here. This is where the county election precinct currently is. And in this area, I did not count this against any one of the submitted plans because there really wasn't too many effective ways to divide this up. You had no choice. We had to make the decision with the software set up to only allow anyone who's submitting a plan to select the census blocks. The way those census blocks are drawn in this particular area is a little bit awkward from what we might expect up here in the Fort Boise area, but that's the way it's drawn. I can certainly understand why the county elected to go ahead and make this cutoff here because the property in here is all vacant land. So there are some areas where you'll see where there was a decision to say there's no population out here, so the numbers don't reflect. And this will hold true across a lot of the plans. And this is the kind of micro edits that we can make as we move along. We say, oh, we break a district, but if we want to keep it in line with the census boundaries, these are some of the changes we can make where we can take a look at those individual cases and say, all right, is there actually any population in this census block? Because there may not be. So just bear that in mind. So I've ordered everybody's submissions just in alphabetical order. I'll try to walk through these very carefully. So I really look from direction from the commission if you need me to move in a particular area or if each commissioner wants to discuss the logic they had when drafting their boundaries or anything they want to add. So for me, you can kind of direct me in where you want to go. But this is the submission from Commissioner Love. One note I'll point out, this little segment over here, this was an understandable oversight. It happens to just be right where the interstate is, and it's understandable. It probably just got missed during the submission. So there's things like this when I understand like the intention was most likely this, but it's negligible. There are no households within there. I would, I want to see that. So you might see some things like that where there are little pockets that might have gotten picked up that may or may not count. So for this is just a very high level. You can see at least the general intention. And I've also provided the county precincts to see if you want to see where were there cases where they had to be split. I have highlighted those for everyone, so that you can see where those splits were made. And then also, if we want to review the neighborhood associations, we can see how that lined up as well. Before I move any further, questions, thoughts, directions you'd like to take?
Any questions, comments? Chair Love. go ahead.
Yeah, permission to speak. So I just kind of want to go over my thought process here. I was trying to limit precinct splits as much as possible and kind of do what I thought made sense a little bit as far as where things break is the neighborhoods, kind of keep the bench together, the central bench here at number 2, West Boise pretty much together, South Boise pretty much together. And then, you know, the area around the river, I kind of thought was a nice place to make, to focus number 4, and then really focus on State Street and the foothills with number 3. And that was kind of my mindset. Like I said, there's a couple little errors in there that I need to fix apparently, but yeah, that was my thought process.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Eric? Okay, sounds like you can move on.
All right. Moving on to Commissioner Perry. Here was your submission.
Do you want me to explain, or do you want to give your spiel first?
You know, a lot of these hold true across the board.
Okay.
If you're interested, I can highlight the areas where precincts had to be split. If that's of interest, I can certainly do that.
Sure.
We can also cross-reference too with the count that was in here by how many precincts were split and where they were. They're more or less in the area we thought, that basically circling around the center of Boise, where you'd have to make those trade-offs between population balance.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'll do similar to how Chair Love kind of explained. I thought this was just a kind of simple way to protect, my vision of keeping neighborhoods together, following basic landmarks, major roads, so that there was no confusion on that front. I think District 1, what's nice about District 1 is that I think it concludes most of the West Ada School District, acknowledging from the school trustee perspective that we want to make our precincts and elections align in those areas. Boise School District, of course, does not elect their trustees during the municipal elections. I also like that District 2 follows the boundaries of 5 Mile to the west and Franklin to the south. And of course, the connector to the east, and those precinct boundaries are really strictly adhered to. One thing that I noticed was there were a few times where I felt like precincts had split census blocks, which may be allowed on there. I wasn't sure about it, and it's a couple of areas. I wrote them down loosely, and don't use these as like the final ones, but I noticed one by the VA, one at 5 Mile and 84 near Catherine Albertson Park and near the Boise River. So I don't know if that's something that we need to address or talk about, but I just wanted to get on the record that I found some challenges there. If Eric, you would click the neighborhood associations. I did my best. I think it is going to be harder than I thought to keep the neighborhood associations like 100% intact. That said, I think we tried our best. When I was reviewing this, I tried my best to really think about keeping those kind of central areas together. I, of course, live on the depot bench, so I was really thinking about folks up on the bench who I know have been asking for representation for a really long time. So that's my best map. Like Chair Love, I know it's maybe not perfect. I just want it out there for viewing, and yeah, happy to take questions. Or Eric, if you have any.
None on my part, but I can definitely confirm with you, there are areas where the precincts crisscross some of the census blocks. And that would be a discussion we'd have to have with the county elections, is if conscious decisions were made or their data was drafted based on perhaps a different set of baseline work than ours. So that can happen. Usually you can see the intention where some of that line work was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But there are areas where.
Permission to answer that, maybe?
Go ahead, Mickey. Go ahead, Chair Love.
So in my history with designing precincts, what's actually kind of in code for the precincts is they have to follow known boundaries, roads, rivers, geographic boundaries. They don't necessarily have to stick to census blocks. And so they tend to follow a little bit more population groupings. And like I said, those main things like roads and known like blocks. Sorry for the baby in the background. And yeah, anyway.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Peter, go ahead.
So are we locked into being not splitting the census blocks?
My understanding is we can draw those boundaries where we see fit. The census blocks allow the software to accurately calculate the population.
Mhm.
We'll have to make conscious decisions in those census blocks if we choose to break them, to take a harder look to say, where are the housing structures actually within that block? Because it just might be that it is a very awkward looking census block just based on the way the road network's laid out.
Right.
We'll see that a lot out in the foothills.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe possible, if there aren't too many of them and they're all fairly small, that we can maybe deal with that by
Yes.
drawing the line through them. Okay.
Commissioner Spiker, did you have something to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
That'll be really helpful if we can split up those census blocks, because I think that was one of the biggest challenges I had, trying to keep the precincts together.
Yes, it can be done. I will say we had to make that conscious decision in the software because it was a slippery slope if we allowed ourselves to snap to the county precincts, because that data does not align perfectly. It would have made very questionable data. But as we've seen from the bounces that we've had, most of them are relatively small. We've been able to look by census block, or excuse me, the precinct by precinct, where those breaks are happening, to see what actually makes sense on the ground.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments? All right, Eric, go
Okay.
ahead. Thank you.
Commissioner Peter had 2 submissions. I'll start with the first one. This one had a fair amount of splitting up the precincts, but I will say, I think out of all of them, this balanced the population probably the closest out of all of them. But you can see where you had to start making, I can envision that you had to start making micro decisions about those census blocks to get this as balanced as possible, where it's competing with your other goals.
Mhm.
Any questions or follow up on this
Yeah,
one?
Commissioner Peter, do you want to explain as we go along, or do you want to move through it, or?
Why don't I'll give you just a little bit about my objectives too. So since there was such an emphasis on population, I thought, well, let's see, what it would take to get there. And I know there's a lot of tweaking, as I'm sure on all your maps is the same situation. So when you start digging in, you only had so much time, and it is very tedious doing this. So I try to get it down to the smallest number possible while maintaining very logical boundaries and generally physical boundaries. So I did not treat the connector as a boundary, for example, unlike some of the other ones. I think that was on my second map, actually. And I was aware of splitting them, but it does meet that goal. So I just did that quickly, thought, let's see what that looks like. And then I went on to Plan B.
All right.
Yeah, let's go to our second map. All right.
Segue to Plan B.
Now, the second map is quite different because I looked at this from the context of the precincts and the legislative districts. Not exactly, because obviously the districts go outside the city boundaries, for example, but I fiddled with this quite a bit, trying to fit in the neighborhoods, not by the definition of the city, the neighborhood associations, but the populations. And it gets, as you know, really tricky when you're trying to get District 6 to the appropriate size, but not go jumping across the interstate and taking in whole neighborhoods to do that. I think I'm not satisfied with how that worked out in the end, but I stuck with it because I wanted to get it submitted. And I tried to get the boundaries to main roads, because I was thinking more in the context of making it easier for people to know what district am I in, rather than having too much of these very complicated boundaries. And I tried to make it a little more compact. I was not at all looking at the neighborhood associations. And I have to admit, that's probably a bit of a bias on my side, having absolutely no experience with neighborhood associations. So as far as my 22 years here, they didn't exist. So I don't know what, how they fit into governance. Okay. So I was thinking more in terms of governance rather than neighborhood associations. And while I'm on that subject, one thing I think we need to emphasize is those are not homeowners associations. Those are neighborhood associations, because it's very easy to jump between the two and get very confused. I'm aware the bench has a strong sense of place. The north end and the east end have a strong sense of space. But as far as governance, having the associations influence these decisions, to me, I couldn't make that work. And then I also looked at the West Ada County, and I've gone back and forth on that because yes, you can make District 1 very long and skinny and have that encompass all the West Ada neighborhoods. But, again, it's a very odd shape, and whether it really, and it's somewhat diverse, does it really represent a community in itself? So that's why I have one much wider and more blocky that matches more of what the legislative districts are. So I just thought I should have that out there as one of the examples.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments? Eric, do you have anything to add before we move on, or?
No, just that I will iterate that, as Commissioner Peter said, it's a challenge to get this really balanced and find the best meat. You're going to have to find the best balance you can across goals that are going to compete against each other. So,
Awesome. Okay.
and anybody's going to have that challenge.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, Commissioner Spiker had two proposals as well. This was his first one. Got to see how it matched up with the precincts. Just several locations where it had to be split in certain areas. But a lot of these, I think as Commissioner Peter had mentioned, that they do fall along main roads for these. So I do know when Phil was last time, he was before us saying, try to make you think about the people who are living in these areas, that while they might end up in different council districts, voting wise, it may not be quite as bad.
Commissioner Spiker, do you want to add any comments or, okay, go ahead.
This was, I guess, my rough draft. I think I'd rather speak to my second map. Definitely feel like this one was better. I tried to focus on geographic things like the river to split the zones up. One challenge I had was balancing District 6 and 4. Like Commissioner Peter was saying, it's really hard because you get into that point where you have to jump across the interstate. I was also thinking that if I came in a little bit light on District 6, that we might anticipate some growth in the southwest area. But other than that, I just tried to use major roadways and geographic features such as the river think I used New York Canal in there at some point. Yeah,
Awesome. Eric, do you want to show the precincts on? Yeah. See the. Awesome. Okay, any questions, comments from other commissioners? All right, sounds like we can move on to the next one.
All right. Last, Commissioner Valderrama. This was her submission.
Hi, so yeah, this was not easy.
What is not?
As we all know, it was, I think I had the hardest time trying to figure out 6 and 4, and then trying to keep that core of the downtown kind of together. That was kind of my train of thought was, okay, where's the downtown? It's like, what's the area that encompasses it? And then there was that weird area right above on area, right now on number 4 that touches up on 3. Right in there, like I tried bringing up that top part into 3, but then there's 2 pieces that kind of horseshoe. And I don't know if you guys noticed that, but it horseshoes it and it makes it look like we're like gerrymandering, right? It's like we're making this weird shape of this other area, and then there's like this little island way off onto the other area. And that made it kind of hard because then I had to like balance out and take out or move the boundary for number 5. And then I think I don't know how we can like maybe improve that. And I don't know if Eric, if you can show that, but like when I was trying to move like you're like, okay, I'll remove this little piece here, move it down to this other section. There was like that one spot that was just kind of tough to do.
Yeah.
And I just try to keep the specific areas together. So number 1 and number 2, trying to keeping them together. And then the southern portion, 6, just trying to keeping it to the south. And then it is a very difficult way to kind of like keep the information or the demographics pretty balanced. I did utilize main roadways and just kind of like geographic kind of points together. I did use the Y as kind of like a starting point for that's the 5th district right there, trying to keeping that together in the Y, and then keeping everything kind of south of that for the 6th district. So it was kind of, this has been an interesting exercise. How do you balance everything? And then looking at the demographics and keeping those guys balanced. As a sociologist, I'm trying to be attentive to that information and keeping everything kind of balanced. So, but yeah, that area between 3 and 4, that kind of horseshoed was a little bit tough. And then there was another one that popped at the bottom of 6 down there in the corner with 4. It again did the kind of the same thing. I was trying to remove one area, but then kind of highlighted it all.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Peter.
I just like observe, yes, I'm exactly the same experience with you, Commissioner Valderrama, and I think probably all of us, is that boundary between 4 and 6. I don't have any strong suggestions on how to deal with that. And obviously in the next 10 years, that area is changing quite dramatically, and whether that's even something we want to think about. But the same as Commissioner Spiker, I was thinking, okay, if this one's a little light, it may not be inappropriate because we can foresee it having a much growth in the population down there. And plus there's areas that I believe could be annexed by the city boundaries in that area as well. And, but in the city area, I also had the same problem on that boundary between 3, 4, and 5. When you get into town, where do you draw the line? But I do like your approach of trying to have very clear boundaries wherever possible. So it is easy for our citizens to know, yes, I am in this district without having to have to work their way through a maze of paperwork. So anyway, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peter. Eric, can you pull up that spreadsheet again with the overall kind of population deviations? Maybe like walk us through kind of, I don't know, what that looks like overall. And maybe just for the public, explain sort of what the legal or what we're aiming for and, kind of just cover that. That'd be awesome.
Sure. Under the most perfect conditions, which will not exist, every district would have an equal population number. So our goal, and as is defined by legislature, is to get as close as possible. There's not a specific target. It is just a little bit subjective about how good is good enough. I would say based on all the proposals that were put in here and what we saw from peer agencies that we touched base with to say, what do we need to be shooting for? This is well within the range. The general consensus, and this is based on just input from other agencies we touched base with, they said, if you're less than 6%, you're in a safer spot. But like I said, ideally, it would be even population across the board, but that just may not be, it's usually not feasible to get that accurate. So with the differences in here, there is a target population for each district, which the Maptitude software does account for. And so every time a boundary is defined, it will recalculate and say, what percentage are we above or under what that target number is.
Okay.
So as you compare the ones in here, you'll see that some come a little bit under, some come a little bit over, but bear in mind, this is 1.26%. So think about that. If you're dealing with 100%, you're 1% off in that particular area. Not bad at all.
Okay.
It is difficult to get an even balance across the board, as you've seen with some of these where Commissioner Peter really probably got as close as I think is feasible with a lot of these. Is that the trade-off is it's competing against your other objectives to try to make elections easier for the citizenry. So trying to find, all right, where do you get the best balance? There truly probably isn't a perfect scenario. There's probably a handful that are going to get as close as we can get. So with these numbers, you have to take them in consideration with everything else going on that you're doing. And so with the number of splits too, some of these we'd have to take a look and say, well, off the cuff, 2 looks great. And that could be fine because that would definitely make county elections happy because the setting up for elections will be significantly easier. If we start, and forgive me as I'm going through.
May I ask a question while you're doing that?
Absolutely.
And this is probably for you, Chairman Love. How many precincts are there in the city of Boise? Do you know?
Well, when I was there was about 50% of the population. So it would have been like 75-ish. But they added a whole 50 of them in this past redistricting session. So I imagine we gained probably 25. So you're probably close to 100 precincts. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I mean, like 2 out of 100, that's fairly minuscule. And then of course, as you get up, it gets a little bit more complicated. And part of it too, with splits, like we talked about, if you're following roads, it makes it a whole lot easier, both from an administrative perspective, but also from like a voter perspective. So as sticking to the precinct lines is ideal, but if we absolutely are going to break somewhere, we probably should try and focus on breaking on a road if possible.
Awesome. Okay, any other questions, comments?
Where did mine?
Okay. So Chair Love, the next item on the agenda, I think is for you, and it's the evaluation of maps and next steps. So I'm happy to try and take it, but I think this was your item you requested on the agenda. If you want to go ahead and take the lead, go ahead.
So really that was kind of focusing on what we just did with Eric, but kind of setting it up to show the public how we are going to process these maps once they submit them and what we want that to look like. So Eric just walked us through how he presented it with the spreadsheet, all these factors. And we have to decide if those factors are what we want, if there's anything additional that we want. That would be kind of what I was going with this action item.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Chair Love. So I think some of the questions that I have for myself is like, do we want to put these maps out on the public website? So if you want to have your map submitted for the public to review, I do believe the next steps, I'm going to hand it over to Hannah in just a second to talk about the tool and releasing it to the public and maybe what that looks like. So Hannah, do you want to cover kind of those expectations next, and we'll go from there?
Sure. Thank you. So the plan, as we talked about at your first meeting, is that we'll have the next meeting will be a public hearing on October 19th. So our plan is tomorrow by 5 p.m., I think. We will have the mapping software and the basic requirements and instructions on the Districting Commission website. We'll send out a release that has that information so members of the public can submit their maps there. We'll close that access to the software on October 13th. So that gives the public 2 weeks to draft and submit maps. And then prior to that meeting on the 19th, we would make sure that those maps can be accessed by the public to view, and any maps of yours that you want up there as well, so that they can have a couple of days to look at each of the maps and prepare for any testimony they want to provide, virtually, written, or in person on the 19th.
Okay. Awesome. So Hannah, if commissioners want their maps to be posted publicly, what do you suggest is the best way to do that? Do we just let Eric know? Do we publish it ourselves? And maybe walk us through kind of what they look like if people want to share their maps with the public for that to be considered as a public input.
Sure. You've got two options. If you want to make the maps that you created available for citizens to review in the Maptitude software, they could use yours as a start. You simply have to log into yours and say share. So anybody who signs up with an account through the software could look at yours in more detail, and they could also expand upon it. If they, I like this as a base, but what about this? And they could submit that as their own if they want to. I would recommend that I can make this data available through the web for people to compare through, so they don't have to log into anything if they don't want to. They can just come and review. That's easy enough for me to do. I've got options to make that available, so it would just be available off that main web page.
Okay.
And you can do both as well.
Okay. Well, personally, go ahead.
Ask
Yes,
a question.
Madam
Can
Chair. Go ahead.
we make some small edits to our maps before we do that?
You certainly can.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, when you do submit them though, I will be double checking, because you have to make sure you leave it as the same name, and I'll know that, okay, we're replacing this with the first draft versus, because people can submit multiple options should they choose.
Okay. Thank you. I know definitely from my perspective, like I am not going to pretend like my map is the best map by any means, but I do think it's helpful for the public to be able to react to maybe something. So obviously that's within your purview if you all want to share kind of what you have to work with, but that's just my 2 cents. So Eric, is there a timeline that we need to tell you, like map wise, for you to get it out there, or can we just, do you have a time limit that you want to do? Do you want to do it before the release comes out, I guess is a better way to phrase the question.
I won't be able to get everything of your submissions out by tomorrow. We can have the software out for the public to review, but shortly thereafter, on Monday or Tuesday, I can have your maps.
Okay. Perfect. Sounds good. Monday or Tuesday. Okay. Commissioner Peter, did you have something to add?
I do. I have,
Okay.
well, one of it was questions was how soon should we get them to Eric? And can we have will it be known by our names, or will we have titles that are distinctive about maybe the objective so the maps can be separated? Like I was viewing my first one as get it as small as possible. Not a very good technical name, but that was my objective. Should we be doing that, or can we have a little text in there to explain this map? This was the purpose of this map. This is its strengths. This is its weakness. Something to set it up.
If that's what you want, and you can provide me the verbiage where you have, I'll
Of
make that
course.
happen.
Yeah. Because I think that would be helpful when they're looking at them, because they are complicated, and trying to compare them, and they can see somewhat what we were trying to do. And I think we should have some kind of disclaimer up front, because we do not believe these are perfect maps, but these are meant as some starting points.
Yeah.
And try to make it clear. And I think we should make it clear about the homeowners association, because I'm sure that will come up, and it would be best to not have that confusion out there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. So let the record reflect our maps are not perfect. That is- I love that. Thank you.
Oh, can I add one more thing?
Please go ahead.
And in our policies, the section 3 that sets out our objectives, that should be also, I assume that would be in there anyway, but so the public knows this is what we were starting with, that we had to do or should do.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on this item before we move on? Because it's a nice segue into the next. Okay. So that's a great segue, Commissioner Peter, for something that I think both Hannah and I are going to talk about, which is just ensuring that the public knows kind of, we want them to draw a map, I think step one. And so the release for that will really help. And of course, if there are specific requests about, if you, Commissioner Love, I know you had spoken about maybe seeing if you wanted to send it to maybe the neighborhood associations. I'm sure that staff can certainly direct that to go out, just so that the most amount of people have access to drawing the map. I also know that staff is going to post, I think on the commissioning, the district commissioning website, kind of this was in our PowerPoint for those of you that can't see me, and maybe you can from the web, but this was in our PowerPoint really talking about sort of the policies that we're reviewing the lens for, because what we don't want to happen is, I think, have the public draw a bunch of maps that really don't meet the legal muster and requirements that both the statute and council set for the commission as we determine kind of next steps. So I'm just going to briefly cover those, which is that we have to have substantially equal populations in each city council district. To the best of our ability, keeping communities of interest together, such as neighborhood associations, keeping precincts together. We know that election integrity is a huge priority of both the commission and city council, and of course to help our folks and friends over at the county elections office. And then if the division of neighborhood associations or precincts is unavoidable, keeping divisions to a minimum of as much as possible, which I know our maps are not perfect, but I certainly saw a valiant attempt by all of you in that software, which I am 100% agree. It is much more complicated than I think any of us maybe thought. So Hannah, do you have anything else to add, or please go ahead?
I'm sure. Thank you. I can just reiterate what you said, that we will have these requirements posted on the website and in the release that goes out tomorrow, so that folks know just the basic requirements before they start drafting, where they can go to draft those maps. And again, we'll post all of their maps before the hearing. So Eric will work over the next couple of weeks as maps are submitted, but we won't likely have them pop up as they go. They'll probably be posted just a couple of days before the meeting for review. And then, and again, to reiterate what you said, that the public is invited into this process in a number of different ways. They can certainly draft and submit maps. They can come to the hearing on the 19th and testify. You also can submit written testimony. There is a link on the districting commission website where you can submit that. And that's certainly, you can provide general comments or comment on specific maps.
Yes.
I have a
Awesome. Yes, Commissioner
question?
Peter, go ahead.
So if people submit paper maps, sketch maps. We'll have those scanned in and available for us. I mean, people can just take a piece, a pen, a sharp pencil and draw their own, right? So.
Hannah, go ahead.
If someone submits testimony and attaches a map or some other document or visual, that would come to you as commissioners as well. It certainly wouldn't be through the software, obviously.
Obviously.
So those won't come to you in the same way, but they would be in your packets as well.
Okay.
I have
So
a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Chair Leff.
How would we evaluate something like that with the population data? I mean, obviously we can visually see the precincts and stuff like that, but how would we evaluate the population in that scenario?
Yeah, and I'm looking for a lifeline, and I was just gonna ask something along the same lines, which I think the preference is that we have folks use the mapping software so that we can get kind of those clear answers. But Eric, why don't you take your best shot?
Yeah, frankly, to compare apples to apples, we would have to take whatever's presented to us, even if it's drawn in on a napkin, try to use the software to replicate that as close as possible with the submitter to say, does this represent what you intended to do? That's probably the only way we could get an accurate representation. There are other solutions out there that make similar calculations. There's open source solutions that do that, but the numbers may differ slightly. I can't speak to it, although they should be using the same census data, there can be occasions where just different metrics were put into place. But yeah, to truly compare everything on the same scale, ideally we would run through that same software.
If I could add something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think we should necessarily invite paper maps, but I suspect that there may be someone who says, oh, I want to do this on not a napkin, hopefully. But it may give us some insight about feelings in certain areas that they're particularly anxious about. And I think being sensitive to that would just be wise on our behalf. I'm looking at you two like you could look back at me. So, yeah, but I think that's important.
Can
Commissioner
we
Leff, go
add
ahead.
that to this statement by chance, like that we would prefer, like, or do we not even want to make that an option, like give anyone that idea?
That's a great question, Hannah. I think, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
It's up to you all. I mean, in addition to just the basic requirements, if there's something that you want me to make sure to include on the website or in the release, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, perhaps Hannah, it could be like to the best extent possible, you're submitting it on the Maptitude software so that we're able to ensure that we're following the policies outlined in the statute in the council. So if other commissioners are comfortable with that, I'm looking around. Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, any other questions, comments on the next process? Go ahead. Yeah, Commissioner Peter.
Again, Hannah, how is this rolled out to the public?
So tomorrow we will issue a press release, and it will likely, I am not in charge of the social media channels for the city, but it'll go out on some of those channels as well. And it will point folks to the district and commission website, and that's where they'll access the software.
Gotcha.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Just a quick question. Are there any part of this that I wanted to kind of bring up? Is there any other interest groups that we can think of that we might want to send this information to besides the media and besides just the city channels? Whether, it's like, the Ada County or, the city of Boise, I'm thinking, I'm spacing on the name of it right now, but yeah, any other groups that might have interest, I guess.
Any questions, thoughts, comments?
I think
Commissioner
maybe-
Valderrama, go ahead.
Hey, I'm thinking the Boise Metro Chamber might have some insight, some possible interest into this. And I know that they have Leadership Boise, which I participated in 2020. I know that they might have folks that might be really, really interested in learning about this and understanding this more. So that's just kind of a thought there.
Just so you guys know, Hannah is taking lots of notes. So if you can't
Thank
see
you,
her.
Hannah.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. So tomorrow afternoon, evening, expect for that to go live, and folks have 2 weeks to submit maps. So if there's no other questions, comments, or business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Vice Chair Perry,
Yeah, go ahead.
make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.